meeting is being recorded. And, Dave, do you care to kick it off?
I would be happy to. Commissioner or committee chair or Ward has asked me to sit in this morning. He's going to join us via the team's meeting. But it is 12:01. Let's call this meeting to order. Let's do a roll call.
Oh, I can do that. Commissioner Washecki,
Present.
Commissioner Anchorage, Commissioner Rotan,
Present.
Commissioner Thompson,
Present.
Commissioner Kessler,
Present.
Commissioner Trainee,
Present.
Commissioner Robbins,
Present.
Commissioner Ward, we already know is not here, but Mr. Chair, you have.
I'm present.
If I get back.
He is here.
I am-
Yes.
Online.
We could really, yeah,
After it.
yeah. All present and accounted for.
All right. Thank you.
Would you like to do introductions around the room for those?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay.
John Daly, Port of Alaska Engineering.
Ronnie Poole, Port Operations.
Bright and Isaac, or project controls.
Mike Rhodes, Port Engineering.
Jim Jager.
Cheryl Beckham, Port Finance.
Steve Rebuffo, Port Director.
Paul Rogers, Port Safety.
Brianna Carr, Port Safety.
All right, thank you. Will you please stand and join me in pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get to the port safety minute, I noticed some additional documents in our packet today. And I would like to compliment those who prepared those reports and thank you for presenting them to us. They're informative. They give us a little advance on some of the things we're going to hear about. It gives us a chance to think about them, see if we have questions. And if we don't have questions, we look to see if there's some answers. So just on behalf of Chairman Ward and myself, we thank you for your effort, your extra effort, and look forward to seeing them in the future.
Thank you.
Port safety minute, Paul.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Guess what month April is safety wise?
The month you retire. Don't break the.
Oh, that too, Commissioner. It's National Distracted Awareness Month. So when you're driving, refrain from texting, especially on the port. And using your cell phones like in the cargo yards, just even off the port in your day-to-day endeavors driving around Alaska. I have the stats, but APD told me how many drivers at one time, it was like 2 years ago, were involved in motor vehicle accidents, and the cause was distracted driving. It's a lot. My son was involved in a motor vehicle accident in his nice car that we bought him and he bought himself, and he doesn't drive that car much after that. And it was a result of distracted driving. He hadn't hurt anybody, killed anybody, but it killed his ego. He didn't get to drive that WRX anymore. He was driving wasn't driving a minivan, but pretty close to it. And this will be my last actual meeting here with the Port Commission. I retire as you know, Stephanie, on April 30th, and it's been an honor to work down here and the port staff. And I don't want to get all teary eyed again, introduce your new port safety coordinator,
I am Rudan.
Lieutenant Carr. She'll be taking over as the port safety coordinator and doing what I did. And I'm getting her all spun up for the next few days until I leave, and it's been nonstop since she's come in until we go home. So that's what we'll be doing for the next few days until Tuesday.
Right.
It's all right? Have a good meeting. Let's go.
On behalf of don't run off, on behalf of the commission, thank you, Paul, for the work that you've done for us for the last, how many years?
16?
16.
Been a poke.
And thank you, and we wish you the very best in this
Thank you.
next chapter of your life.
Thanks, appreciate it.
He's
See you
good.
later. Absolutely. See ya.
And now I expect you've had a chance to look at the agenda. Are there any changes that anyone would wish to make to the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second, Commissioner Robbins.
Oh, sorry, this was staff.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. I was asked to remind everyone to announce their names, particularly in connection with the motion. So we get the motion and the second. Let's look at the meetings for the meeting of March 20th.
Oh, you may not have put it in this. They were emailed to you.
They were, yeah. Yeah. I'll move to approve the minutes from the March 24th meeting, Commissioner Robbins.
This is Stephanie, second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved for the March 20 meeting. Port Director comments. Steve.
Thank you, sir. I have a few to make. I will start with just the explanation why we need to have folks state their name if they're going to speak, if you're sitting here in the room. Because the way the transcript comes back to us is the person who started the recording gets credit for everything that's said. So, and then it becomes a memory exercise for those of us that read the transcript later to figure out who really did say that. Because you all sound alike when it's written down. So help us sort out who said what for the record, please. And that's why we're asking you to do that. A few things. Well, you heard from Paul. Paul's 16 years here at the port is going to be up next Tuesday. And we hired Ruthann to take his place. Those of us that were on the selection committee were absolutely impressed. And she brings a lot of safety background to the job. So we have no concerns that we're going to miss a step with the quality that we've set for a standard down here for safety, and are excited to have her come on board and be part of the team. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. When we get those monthly reports, when the directors get the workman's compensation reports from the risk management office every month to see all the claims that have been filed in the city, it's safer to work at the port than it is to work at the library. And we're pretty proud of that, and would like to continue that track record. And we're very confident that Ruthann is going to do that for us. We also have another farewell to announce today. This is Mike Rhodes' last meeting with us as our port engineer. He was enticed to get hired away by the Forest Service. And his last day will also be next Tuesday. So, we ran Mike through the ringer the entire time he was here. He had the stamina to make it happen and keep the port engineer stuff on track. It's a tough job. There's a lot to do and you got no staff to do it with. So we appreciate what Mike did for us in the time he's been here with us. And now there'll be another vacancy announcement put out there on the street and see if you can find somebody who can fill his shoes. They're coming behind. So in the meantime, we've got a couple of engineering services contracts that we'll lean a little bit more heavily on than we would otherwise to see us through this period of time and see how fast we can get somebody to come in and fill that position. So if you know anybody who's got engineering chops or project management, program management background that might be interested in tolerating this group here, please send them my way. And we'll make sure they get introduced to the HR system here in the community and get all the right paperwork in. So thanks for that. You've heard us talk off and on for the better part of the last year and a half or so about this PCT line silting requirement that we have to get the petroleum lines, the new petroleum lines coming off the PC to the POV inspected and tested, make sure there is no stuff in them, whether it's contaminants or it's leftover
What's
hard hats, gloves, iPads or whatever in those lines before we can actually certify the PCT for fuel deliveries. Last night at the assembly meeting, two very important items were passed by the assemblies that'll allow us now to move forward and making that process happen. Two sole source contracts, one with Marathon, who agreed to provide the fuel, and the other with Udelhoven Oilfield Services, who will make some minor modifications to the PCT, to the POV that are needed to complete this exercise. And then they'll also supervise and manage the whole process to make sure that we do it right and only have to do it once. Both were approved by the assembly. So we will work with Michael Baker International, our engineering services contract, to make sure that we get that moving along as quickly as possible and put that in a rearview mirror so the PCT can not only be used for cement, but we can use it for petroleum as well. So I'm going to be very optimistic that before we hit end of summer, this will be done.
Steve, this is staff. I'm saying that for the thing, you know that. But I have a quick question. This is a dumb question. So it'll be certified.
Asking the right guy.
There you go. So it's certified both for cement and fuel. It's not through the same line.
Not through the same.
Okay.
No.
Okay, that was what, yeah.
Wouldn't that be exciting?
That's why I said it was a dumb question, but maybe there had been engineering advances of which I was unaware.
No. There's a dedicated cement line that goes right to the dome.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah.
And then 6 petroleum lines that the cement guys are forbidden to use.
Well, right, I was wondering if there was like a Y, cement goes here, fuel goes here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe next year.
Cement might be heavier.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know. I didn't see how that was possible. But
maybe next year, but not now. Okay, let's listen. We've got a visit from our good. Yes, got more.
Hey, this is Ron. Yeah. So Marathon's providing the diesel to push the line and prove it. Who's receiving this contaminated diesel and who's buying it?
There's a tank. There's a set aside tank that once all the flushing piece of it is done, that the fuel will go into, and there it'll be held and evacuated. And I think Marathon's going to take it away at the end of it all. But there is a dedicated side where it's going to go. The way the process is set up, and this is it's kind of genius, and it's going to save quite a bit of money on the process, is no ship is involved. It's all going to be done from the land side.
yes.
So we don't have to tie up a tanker sitting at the dock for 4 to 5 days waiting for all this to happen. So a lot of thought and a lot of conversation with the users went into figuring out what this process was going to be. And I think everybody, by consensus, agrees that it's a good one. So we'll be executing it that way.
May I ask a trick question? How many barrels or gallons are gonna be? You someone.
A lot.
I think.
360,000 gallons of jet fuel.
360, oh, okay, that's quite a lot, but that's not cheap.
No,
That's 1,000.
gallon. Yeah, and it's gallons, not barrels.
Right, no, well, that'd be,
Oh, that
yeah,
helps.
Divided by 42.
yeah.
We're also going to get a visit on Monday from the Maritime Administration folks who are managing the grant for the NES1 project. We've been working very closely with them for what seems like forever to get this grant use agreement in place so that the $668.7 million grant, PIDP grant that we got, that we can actually access that money and use it. We're pushing the 11th hour because if you go outside and look, Manson is here to do the water side piece. Granite Construction is here to do the land side part. And we can't give them the green light until this grant use agreement is signed. So we are pushing about as far as we can go before we have to start worrying about, potentially paying damages for delaying the start of the project and tying up these two construction companies. So a lot of work on behalf of the delegation in Washington and working with the Maritime Administration, a lot of confusion about what's going on down here. They finally decided they better send some people to lay eyes on the project and see where it is we actually are from a on the ground point of view. So they're going to be here on Monday. We kind of hope this will break the logjam with the paperwork part of this that we're all tied up with. Lots of valuable lessons learned on both sides of this argument. But I'm going to stay optimistic that that we'll get a breakthrough when these guys can actually see, hey, we haven't cheated and started without their permission, which is my gut tells me is part of why they're here. And some of the questions that their lawyers have brought up are more easily answered if you walk the ground and look at what's going on as opposed to read the paper that we sent you and try and figure it out for yourself. So I think there's a lot to be gained by spending some time with them. And they said Monday and Tuesday, they'll be here to walk the ground. So wish us luck on it. With any luck, it'll be very noisy and dusty. We have this meeting in June. Speaking of June the 9th, Sunday, June the 9th is the scheduled date for the renaming ceremony for the port. Don Young Port of Alaska is what our name is now. It hasn't formally been added to much of anything just yet. But on June 9th, we're going to have a ceremony here where, the monolith that is down there at checkpoint 3. We'll go ahead and we'll modify that logo to better identify who we are now. And my understanding is because of the size of the crowd that is going to turn out for this, and if you all haven't gotten invitations, you will shortly. They're going to have the party part of it at the Denina Center. And a small group will be down here for the unveiling of the new signage on the port. And there'll be some kind of a audio video link. So everybody who's at the Denina Center can watch it. I think that's the way the logistics is going to get done. So June the 9th, put it on your calendar. Jim, I don't know much more about the details, but
That's about the details that are out there right now. One thing I was gonna say is if you look at the top of your meeting memorandum, you can see what the new logo or one version of the logo. So it's very similar to the old logo, which is intentional because that way we wouldn't have to redesign everything.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Sneaky how you just added Don Young on the top, right up by the, yeah.
You would be surprised at how many things you'll have to change.
Oh, I know. Branding it, yeah, it's a big deal.
and item last for me is we will hold our next port commission meeting in the conference room in the new building. Okay, whether we're moved in or not, but I'm pretty confident that we'll be 99.9% of the way there. Where we stand right now. Trying to divest ourselves of all the furniture items that won't be used. There've been quite a few takers out there for those items that still have life in them, that we're not gonna move over to the new building. Some of the administrative supplies and equipment will go ahead and move over there. The furniture that we've ordered starts to get delivered on May the 20th. And I doubt very much that's gonna be a 2-month process of getting all that put in place. And this table, after we're done meeting with our Marriott friends next week, this table and the smart board and all the associated equipment gets moved across the way. So we'll figure out what to do with this big empty room for meetings for the next few weeks. We'll get this moved and situated over there so that next time we have a port commission meeting, we'll do it over there, and we'll do them all from there from now on, from the new digs. And that concludes my comments.
Good news, thank you. Any questions of Steve?
Can I keep my same seat? I've got to adjust it the way that
We may have to put a sticker on the back so we
Like Sheldon on Big Bang Theory.
acoustics is perfect.
All right, staff reports.
So what we did was, we gave you all the written staff reports
Okay.
in advance, because we'd like to allow the new business folks as much time as possible to speak. But if for those of you who were able to read it ahead, have some questions you'd like to ask the staff based on those reports, we're happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can come back to that later.
All right, any questions of staff? Again, thank you for the reports, they're informative. Old business, I see none.
You have none.
The correspondence received by the commission.
Yes, and you all should have gotten an email from me with this letter from the mayor's office attached to it, announcing that the assembly has established a new policy that they put in effect between now and the end of the election, and the identification of who the new mayor is going to be, where they basically put on hold any future or any near-term appointments to boards and commissions in the city. And so that they don't have to do it again.
Right.
After the mayor, if the mayor changes. So they put a hold on doing that. They've made a couple of exceptions to that already. In fact, they did 2 last night, because unlike you guys, there are boards and commissions out there that have a hard time making quorum. And some of them are ones that are policy related decision making that has to happen in support of the city. So those, they've not held back filling the vacant seats, so that those commissions won't have a bigger problem making quorum than they already. But for the rest of us, and I looked ahead, there's nobody leaving between now and even October. So it's not an issue for us, but for some other boards and commissions. Any appointments to vacancies are going to get held until after the mayor is appointed or mayor person is reinstated. And that's what that letter said.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any further correspondence?
And that was it.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to new business.
Well, let me introduce Dan Solomon and Johnny Arano from Moffett Nickel. They're here to give you an updated status report on a contract to do an economic study regarding the port that was requested by the assembly to help inform their decision with respect to what the design for T2 should be. Part of the going in argument was there are two ways that we can go with T2. One is to create a dock structure that is the same width as the one we have now. And the other is to make it the same width as what the design for the future T1 is going to look like, so that it's uniform width all the way to the end, all the way to the end of both terminals. Part of the reason why there was a pick one sort of situation created was because as the current user of T2, Hope is, as far as their requirements are concerned, they don't need a dock width for gantry cranes because all they need is trestles that go out to a dock for their ramps, for their roll-on vessel. Now it's but some conversations that have taken place since then have sort of, begged the question, what's the best way to go forward economically for the port, for the city? And which design might give us the most flexibility? And if we decide it is two terminals of uniform width, does it make sense to do it now, or does it make sense to do it later? But pick the shorter version, pick the narrower version now. So we've turned these guys loose to look at all of that and look at the economics and help, help provide the data to the assembly to help to make that decision. So I'm gonna not steal their thunder anymore than I already did, and let them tell you where we stand on this, because they owe the assembly their final report at the Enterprise Utility Oversight Committee meeting, a special meeting of the Assembly set up for May 17th. So this is a chance to get a sneak peek at where that's going for the commission. Okay, guys, floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Bring it up. See. If you all can see my screen, I think we're good spot. So first off, thank you all for allowing us to present this afternoon now. Yeah, just as a way of background, sorry, for the record, this is Dan Solomon with Moffett and Nichols speaking. We're about, I'd say 95% of the way there in terms of our report. We've delivered and shared a draft report towards the end of last week. And, between now and the 17th, we'll incorporate any feedback. We have a few loose ends we're aware of that we want to tie up. But we're happy to present, I think quickly, probably some of the material we have at a high level, and then allow for some questions at the end. Sorry, I can advance it. So we've added our presentation to the body of the full report, Jim. So I'll cut these out and send the slides as a follow-up for you, so you can distribute as appropriately.
I'm here. It's
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, stop.
We're just adjusting the volume. Keep going.
It's really loud.
I can
Please.
whisper if it helps. So, just as quick way of introduction to the report, and for the benefit of the group, we were asked to do a economic assessment for the Port of Alaska in the context of PAMP, and in doing so, there's I think probably themes that you've discussed internally before or have heard externally regarding, what's the potential for volume outlook in the state, what's the importance of the Port of Alaska itself in meeting those needs, what are some of the trends we see within the industry globally that are, likely to manifest themselves with changes inside the port, or influence the decision making at the end. So we've addressed those in the report, but I think, the focus of the analysis of our presentation today is kind of to touch on a few of the items that may be new to you. But, again, just in the context of overall growth, we look at moderate to slow growth overall for the state, and that translates into moderate to slow growth in volumes at the port over the forecast horizon. We do see trending upside volume growth from the petroleum products, particularly related to the jet fuel, but and then container volume outlooks are generally flat. And we've provided the economic basis that supports that outlook. What we've also done is evaluate what is needed from a port infrastructure standpoint and continue to fall on the message that PAMP should aim to provide redundant container and petroleum berths at the Port of Alaska. And by redundant, we mean able to provide the same services at either one of the two berths. There is enough volume, there is enough need for resiliency inside the system due to lack of alternatives really out inside the state that really necessitate, you need to build redundancy, you need to build resiliency inside the Port of Alaska. What may or may not, which this is a new figure that we're happy to talk to about, but in terms of establishing what's the value of the cargo docks at the Port of Alaska, it's very difficult to put an economic figure to that. We've come up with a structured approach that says, should the cargo docks go down, and based on an estimated need to redirect cargo through alternative gateways and or transport that by truck, the value to the economy is roughly about $39 million a week. And that's a sizable figure. There's obviously a lot of movement in and around that figure that we're happy to discuss and address in the report. But I think that's something that you probably not heard before, and we can get into that a bit later. In terms of the PAMP assessment itself, we've developed this schematic, if you will. But essentially, the overall takeaway is developing T2 as an identical structure as T1. It appears, to be supported by all the qualitative conditions, factors that we've considered, future market conditions, changes in the industry, the increases in vessels, the increased propensity to use containerized ships, the likelihood of higher cruise traffic, the need to support petroleum volumes, et cetera. Observe best practices at other ports. When you look at facilities that operate in similar economies that are isolated and import dependent, the redundancy, the level of infrastructure provided to those are indeed protective of those economies, and such infrastructure should be developed here as well. And potentially, I think the most important facet of our project was engaging some of the stakeholders. So we were able to speak directly to the two container operators who provided great feedback and insight into their operations, and obviously what they feel is best for the port long term based on the needs of their customers. But we've also spoke directly to the military as well as the liquid bulk carriers and cargo owners. But essentially, when you look at the general cargo docks as sort of as Steve teed up, T1 as designed, we broke it up into really a 0 to 20 year forecast horizon and a 20 to 75 year longer term outlook. T1 as designed, 870 feet at the 120 foot width allows you to service what we see would be the size ships that would call that terminal in terms of the container trade. So this would be, Matson's got roughly what's known as, I'm sure you've heard the term 20 equivalent unit TEU vessels. They have 2,200 TEU vessels that are calling. These will be upgraded to 26s, but the length overall is not changing dramatically, if at all. It's really the width of the ships that are changing. The length of the overall dock is appropriate to handle vessels up to 4,000 TEU, so quite sizable upgrades that would allow you to get a larger ship overall. If you go the T2 route at 69, you hit an inflection point, a decision point in roughly 15, 20 years, with totes retiring their existing fleet. If they maintain or rebuild vessels that are similar or almost identical to their existing Orca fleet, nothing should change. And at 69 feet, you could carry on and provide a unified service. However, if tote does change, and if there is if they decide to go, with a fully cellular container vessel, or what's known as a conro vessel, a combination container ro-ro vessel, there may be there would be a need to widen that dock, and that, as Steve alluded to, you face the challenges of both the cost as well as the operational impacts to what happens when you make that change. Conversely, if you go with T2 at the 120, you're able to accommodate totes vessels as is. They're able to utilize the ships, no interruption to their service, and then long term, should they decide to change, it's already accommodative, and that this is the option that obviously brings you the most flexibility, which is needed, which is absolutely needed inside the context of the available infrastructure inside South Central Alaska and meeting those high population centers. In terms of the petroleum and cement docks, this is also part of our scope. PCT should serve as a suitable piece of infrastructure that will last the 75 years, meeting the demand of both the dry bulk and the liquid bulk. A second petroleum berth is absolutely required, whether that's a standalone facility. We're in the process of working that out. But clearly 2 petroleum berths are needed. Would you rather I take questions as we roll through, or save them for the end? I'm not sure of the time constraints, so.
Are there any questions yet? By anybody? I think you should keep going, Dan. We'll interrupt you if there's a question.
Okay, terrific. So, and I apologize for the wordiness of our slides. These are taken directly from our report, and we'll share them, and I'll give you an opportunity to look at them closer. But what we wanted to do is introduce this concept of the economic cost of the service disruption at Port of Alaska, and give you the sort of quantitative financial potential impact of what that means if the docks were to go down. And the docks could go down for any number of reasons, or a combination of one of the two go down, or not go down for a full week. This is an analysis that's really kind of outside of our scope or our ability to answer without some additional input. But what we can do is provide you the bookends, if you will, and the orders of magnitude. So what we've done is essentially take the overall volume that the Port of Alaska would handle, on the container trade on a weekly basis, and should that, which is roughly say 8,000 TEU, should that volume need to be pushed through an alternative gateways, whether that's due to a natural disaster or ship strike or equipment failure, both either at the port or on the vessels themselves. A portion, if all of that cargo would be redirected. The assumption here, and based on the conversations we've had with the stakeholders, is that Seward, the Port of Seward, would be considered the next best suitable option in terms of providing a partial relief. So what we've modeled essentially is a 50-50 split of the cargo being put on barges, sent from Tacoma into Seward, and then trucked up into Anchorage, versus the remaining 50% getting trucked directly via the Alaskan Highway into the Anchorage market. The 50-50 split reflects more or less what we've determined to be at the maximum. It's basically the maximum number of barges that Seward could handle in a week, which worked out to be between 6 and 7. So you can get roughly half the volume that Port of Alaska handles a week from the container vessels onto 6 720 TEU barges that would have to come up. And there's a whole slew of operational and cost implications that come with that switch. And there's a whole slew of operational and cost implications that come with this, with the trucking activity. But what we've done is we've modeled both the economic costs, which reflect those operational costs. There's health and safety costs that get included, and environmental costs in terms of emissions that are resulted from the change in the mode. And additionally, there's a macroeconomic cost to the overall economy, which we've included as a input. The service disruption doesn't just end at the port. It impacts the retailers. It impacts the wholesalers. Even services are impacted, and we use standard economic multipliers to reflect that impact. Essentially, sorry.
I had a question, quick question.
Yeah.
Did you include military costs in your analysis?
No, that's one of those that we are reluctant to get into.
Okay.
To the extent that we could model so that they have sustainable cargo flows, which would come in on the containers, those would get reflected. But putting a cost to, say, not being able to run one of their operations, the training operations, is just, it's a little outside our expertise.
Yeah.
I know it would be massive.
Yeah, understood. That would probably be something that you would want to highlight that's not included because of this when you give the presentation.
Fair point.
Hey, Dan, this is Billy with Tote. Hey, did I understand you correctly that so 50% of the volume could go into Seward and the other 50 would be trucked up the Alcan?
Yes. And
So
I'm sorry.
Well, I was just wondering how you incorporated lack of truck power for that, because that's a significant increase from where we're at today. And we struggle with truck power coming up the Alcan now.
No, so there's absolutely limitations on the analysis. This strictly reflects sort of the operational costs based on the mode of transportation itself. And so admittedly, yeah, there's lack of labor in Seward or lack of trucking capacity coming out on Alcan that could support it. And we can't get to those numbers.
And another point as well, on top of the lack of trucks, lack of longshoremen, and if we move down there to do the job and for whatever reason we're part of the union that was down there, we would run everybody out of town because there'd be no place to live.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I mean,
It's already a place to live.
Right.
So this is, it's considered a what's the word I'm looking for, Johnny?
This is Johnny. Yeah, this is kind of considered what you would call kind of an emergency scenario
Emergency, yeah.
response. You know, and I think in our larger report, we get more into the.
Oh, we lost him. Is everyone there?
We can hear you. Would that
Yep.
impact?
Yeah, Johnny, you're back.
Hello?
Yeah, you cut out for a second.
Yeah, so we get into the labor availability issues, the trucking availability issues. But I think Dan said it well, and the idea is to kind of bookend the magnitude of not having the general cargo docks available for a week. And it really gives us a starting point in beginning to trying to quantify the impact of the cargo docks. And I think that's a good step in understanding what the benefit of the decision made with the PAM process. But to everyone's point, there are a lot of operational difficulties with whatever option. I mean, getting 50% of those, the trucking option from Seattle would have its own operational issues of trying to get 4,000 boxes or 4,000 containers trucked up the Alaskan highway and having the trucker availability for that. And we're well aware of that.
Can you guys clarify, when you're doing this analysis, are we assuming some kind of emergency or just the dock not being available? Because I think there's a assumption that 100% of the cargo that the cargo carriers bring would be needed in an emergency. And I think that's a flawed assumption, right? You don't need washing machines. You don't need certain other things when you have a natural disaster. So there's a bit of a, what are you trying to move and why versus the analysis? And I'm kind of struggling to understand how you guys put this together.
Did you catch that?
Yeah, we caught the second part.
Yeah, I got it. I think again, what we put together is saying you don't have the cargo docks and the cargo needs to get to Alaska somehow.
Right, but why? I think the question is, why do you not have the cargo docks? Because the cargo, your default assumption that all the cargo is needed, I think is flawed. Because if you have a natural disaster or an emergency that takes out the docks, you don't need a lot of the cargo that you're bringing in, right?
Correct.
Well, that would be true during the emergency portion of the scenario, but assuming we want to keep living, you're eventually going to want everything in. So what I would suggest is maybe expand, you have your category of a safety cost. Maybe you expand it into a public health, safety and welfare, or a general cost that will include everything from individual safety to impacts on the highway between here and Seward if you would add 4,000 extra trucks to it. And what would the impact on the Alcan be if you added the 4,000 trucks that would run up that and have to cross the border? It's basically a number that's going to be really very difficult to come up with, but we need some sort of general idea without getting into making it so nitty-gritty granular that we get distracted. Just what would the impact be, in big numbers? I think if we could better reflect that, it would probably answer most of our questions.
This is Commissioner Peggy.
I would also recommend you guys include Valdez Container Terminal because that's also a viable scenario that's been brought up in other presentations by this port. Right, and that's a much shorter drive.
Valdez.
No, it's not.
And having grown up in Valdez, this is Peggy Rotan, Commissioner. Having grown up there, that pass is not always available. So that's not 100% reliable alternative. It's a possible gap fill in, but it's not something we can count on. What is being transported from Seward to Anchorage currently? Because I know there's cargo being transported from there and how much of our available space is there left over? Say there is an emergency and we have to use it. Are we utilizing that up to 50% so we can only utilize additional 50%?
Right now, it's primarily bulk cargo.
Okay.
We need to pipe in or we need certain materials.
Yeah.
But it's
It-
still being used.
It's not food, clothing, that kind of stuff.
So they would shut down all of that cargo then? I mean,
Well, I don't know.
You could go against the capacity. I think at some point, the numbers they're using Seward as the example. We would almost certainly have to spread it out between Seward and Whittier and Valdez. But there are, depending on what the event was, what bridges got impacted, what communities you could get into or not. There are just too many factors to figure it out. So they've taken one number and said, okay, we're going to use this as our example. It won't be exactly this, but it'll be something like this.
Well, and I get that, but when we have an example like this, and we're putting out a possibility that like this could happen, it's not possible, right? We're not gonna live comfortably if this happens, right? Like it's just not, the reality is that these docks fall in the water. We're not gonna have toilet paper, and that's just one of the things where we are gonna be short, right?
And that's exactly the point they're trying to make.
Yeah.
They're trying to make it in a generic way because there's no way to predict exactly what the details of the event will be.
Right.
Yeah, and I think another key piece of this is that, and again, I think it'll be very important to emphasize this in the presentation, is when people tend to think about this, they tend to think of both docks going because of an earthquake. They tend to think of it in that regard. But another regard, which I think probably has a higher probability of occurrence, is you lose one dock because a boat's crashed into it, something's gone wrong. So what I think this presentation is about is not protecting against two docks.
We need a uniform dock.
We need a uniform dock, so if one dock goes kablooey, you have the other dock, and that's the key. That's, in my mind, that's the key message here. Because I think if you deviate from that message, you just saw what happened. We're all gonna sit here and tell you why what you thought won't work, because we know how things really work. And so I think that's why it'll be very important to emphasize you want dock uniformity, so you can, I don't want to say swap them in and out, but swap them in and out so that if you have an issue with one dock, you have another dock that's exactly the same that's available.
But wouldn't you have a disruption to service regardless because the boats are coming in at the same time?
Yeah.
I guess that's my question is the fundamental question that this is trying to say is we need the dock to be just as big across the whole face. And this is what we're saying is the justification, because otherwise there's an economic impact that's very high to the city, correct?
It's just not
To
economic.
the state,
Like,
not just state.
But it's just not economic. You're talking about life and death and people eating or not eating, right? Like it's, the petroleum docks, but we still need food, right? Like you're gonna get your gas.
Yeah, I would argue you want your heat too, but I get your point. I think the question that I have is when you're framing it up, if you're already talking about shifting the schedules and things like that, you already have economic impacts. And it seems like you're not going to have the boats coming in at the same time regardless. So there's a bit more of a question that I guess I'm not following. And I apologize if there was maybe parts of this that were done in other meetings that I'm confused about, but if you're going to start making alterations, at what point do you start, or how do you define the scenario, I think is what was brought up that makes a key piece of this.
I think you're making the point. We need to just have a generic discussion because there are just too many details. Exactly.
Fair enough. And then if I could ask, since we're going down this path, there was talk of having a second petroleum facility or evaluations. Is that assumed to be at completion of the PAMP or during the entirety of the PAMP?
Steve, do you mind taking that?
Well, let me see if I can answer your question, Lev. What's obvious is we are always going to need at 2 petroleum facilities to keep up with the business load that we have on the petroleum side. We're looking at, well, we've got the PCT and soon that will be online, and that's why we're not taking POL1 offline for demolition until the PCT is done. But there'll be the PCT and POL2, and could very well be another, in addition to the first cargo terminal that also provides a petroleum offload facility. The point of the story was, and I think these guys can tell you who on the petroleum side they've talked to, but it's very clear that we're going to need 2 petroleum facilities at the end of the PANP, and that could be as a minimum. And it wouldn't upset any of us if it's the PCT, a demolished and replaced POL2, and a petroleum offload capability at Terminal 1. I don't think anybody's going to argue that that's a bad idea. But we do know that we're going to need at least 2 when everything is said and done.
No, thanks for that clarification, Steve.
Is that, the second one, is that the one that's up here slotted in under stages 3, 4, and 5? Okay.
So, Dan, if you go back, there was the question on the chat that you may not have seen of which petroleum company or who in the petroleum industry did you talk to? And then please proceed with your presentation.
Sure. Let me see. We spoke with Marathon and Menzies.
Thanks for that. That's why I had the question, Jim.
Right, back to you guys.
Okay. So yeah, I don't want, obviously there's a lot of discussion to be had around these numbers. They can go significantly higher given considerations, or they could go significantly lower. But we did want to take a crack at it. And through the presentation and the report, we've outlined the assumptions that have gone into that and presented this range to indicate, essentially if there's, you have to rely fully on trucking versus being able to barge fully through a secondary port alternative. And whether that's a combination of Seward and Whittier or Seward alone or Valdez, if someone brought up that, that remains to be, it can be discussed, it could be inferred, but this will give you a sense of really what is the overall economic impact on a weekly basis should those cargo docks fail, based on an 8,000 TEU rerouting.
So, what, last question, the $39 million a week, the number you're putting out there, like, just to clarify, who's paying for $39 million a week? It's going to be the customers.
Yes.
It's okay. And this is Stephanie again. I don't know, and this is totally not the way to do it because it's gut feel. But if you asked me in my gut what I thought the economic impact would be, I would have put it higher than 39 million. Because that, if you extrapolate that out to a year, okay, that gets you between, I don't know, 400 and 500 million, something like that. And this seems to me like it'd be like a $1 billion. I mean, it seems like it would just be bigger. But I mean, you're doing it.
A week, 39 million a week.
I know. So you multiply it times 52 weeks a year. It's not that much.
2,500, 2,580 a person.
Yeah. Oh, wait, did I do my math wrong?
Yes.
Oh, it's over $1 billion.
Over $1 billion.
Okay, thank you. I did my math wrong. Okay, I take it all back. It makes sense. I just.
All for.
So I guess we're done.
I was like, God, that just doesn't
See how
seem like.
important math is?
Yeah, well, I'm just going, I have a math degree too. You could say that. But I just
I'm
thinking.
not sure I'd admit it.
Yeah, when in doubt, carry the one.
Yeah.
And for a family, we're talking about $10,000 a year cost, if that number is.
Yeah, no, now that we did the math right, yeah.
Okay, Dan, back
Okay.
to you.
Sure. So I think, you know, again, most of the balance of the analysis is based on our reviews of the operations, the needs of port infrastructure in the state of Alaska, and what the implications are on PAM. So, you know, putting the economic costs aside, what do we see in terms of the demand coming from the existing profile of users, what is likely to occur with, you know, in the future through the introduction of new vessels, what are the best practices we see at other ports of within similar economic conditions. You know, again, just providing overview of what we see from the existing customer base, you know, Matson, Tote serving as the primary users for T1, T2, respectively. Cruise vessels, essentially, you know, not too many calls as of now. The overall outlook is that that number is likely to increase. We're coming off a very low base, but the overall Alaskan cruise market is strong. Vessels are approaching that 1,000-foot sort of limit that's been discussed internally about the need for having, you know, a berth, at least 2 berths capable of handling, you know, a 1,000-foot vessel and something else that should show up if need be. There's a lot of activity on the liquid bulk tankers, whether mostly petroleum, but other chemical products that are coming in, around 37 calls a year. That's going to go up, and obviously put some from constraint on the berth infrastructure that's required for that. In our discussions with the stakeholders, a lot of I don't want to say emphasis, but a lot of discussion was actually had on the available berth windows and how, you know, a month is not a month of regular access, and there's a limited number of days that are removed. So when you again, you begin to talk about, you know, yeah, we may only add 10 vessel calls on the petroleum side to account for higher volumes, but that those 10 calls with, you know, high utilization on the existing infrastructure and limited berth windows throughout the year really do put a strain on the overall system. And the dry bulk vessels at PCT, you know, I think 5-6 calls a year, but they do sit at the berth for a week and a half, 2 weeks. So that obviously limits the availability of PCT to handle the liquid bulk tankers during those times. Just in terms of a benchmarking analysis, we looked at, you know, some of the island economies in the U.S. Though connected to mainland, Alaska really operates and has an economy similar to a maritime island. But I think the important point here is when you go back and you look at these facilities, there's clearly redundancy built into these ports, both in terms of the available berth lengths, the equipment that's in place, their ability to simultaneously handle two vessels of the same kind, particularly again on containers. And you know, just want to demonstrate, and again, it's wordy, but you know, the key takeaway here is that these island economies plan accordingly. They put the infrastructure in place that allows them to handle, you know, multiple vessels of the same kind, perform identical operations across numerous berths, at least 2 berths, in order to ensure that you know, in the event of disruption, in the event of a vessel strike or earthquake or hurricane, what have you, that that operations can continue. Johnny, anything to add on this slide?
No. That's good.
And I think, again, in a simplified form, a large section of the report is dedicated to the inland connectivity of the respective gateways. So how well can they get into the Anchorage Fairbanks market? And we've gone through and clearly Port of Alaska stands out as the best located, strongest gateway for reaching these high demand, important population centers of Fairbanks and Anchorage, without question. Obviously, not to discount the other ones, they are capable of providing truck or rail service to and from the region, but just not to the same extent that Port of Alaska can. There's infrastructure, there's distance challenges that have to be overcome with each of these facilities, and clearly, the ability to provide resiliency to the overall port ecosystem really sits inside Port of Anchorage. If you're going to, develop container capacity, Alaska needs South Central Alaska needs at least 2 container berths. And if you're going to build them, they should be uniform, and they should be both at Port of Alaska. And as we talked about, one of the loose ends on our effort is tying up the stakeholder outreach efforts. But our initial slides, our draft slides, have gone out to each of the respective stakeholders. We've gotten responses back from both Matson and Tote, and have worked those edits into the draft that was shared. I think both companies are supportive of PAMP overall. I would say they as the key container operations both iterated the need for having resiliency inside the port, the ability to provide backup should service disruption occur. Matson has confirmed that they are introducing the larger vessels, so there's going to be a need to improve, obviously, on T1, which is designed and ready for the larger cranes that are needed to service those vessels. They'll be taller, they'll be wider. Tote runs a very good, fast, efficient operation off their RoRo docks, and that should be maintained. And for the next 15-20 years, there's no reason why that should change. They do a great job, and the docks will be built accordingly. They do also note that they won't commit to putting on paper that, hey, we're going to build the exact same vessels 15-20 years from now. There's a lot of change in the industry that could motivate an alteration to their fleet, and whether that's fully cellular or container or Conroe, it has to be planned for. They are. I will note on the Tote operations and Matson too, but Tote runs a very quick operation. They put a lot of labor against the vessel when it arrives, and they're able to achieve much higher basically throughput rates on an hourly basis than you would see with conventional lift on, lift off service. So there's a lot of value in that, and I think going forward, again, for the next 15-20 years, it will be maintained. But as the industry changes, as new vessels are needed, 15, 20 years from now, the likelihood of something different showing up is strong, and that has to be planned for accordingly. We are waiting feedback from the military, from the liquid bulk carriers or cargo owners, and the railroad as well. So once we have the authority from them to include their comments in the presentation, we will include those, and they'll go in the report. And I think
Hey,
that's
I'd like to jump in, and Steve, I think this
Sure.
is a question for you, but you have folks who are not paying tenants at the port who are considered stakeholders, and I feel a little left out. So just want to flag that we do have a facility and have just increased our footprint, and I would appreciate if we got a courtesy review as well.
Noted.
Thank you.
and I think that mostly brings us to the end of what again, we have a very not a dense report that's sitting under review at this point. And without getting too much in the weeds, I think this is probably a good place to leave it. So again, welcome to answer any questions as needed.
Do we have any
Yeah,
questions?
this is Bert with Menzies. I'll go ahead and get you that information you wanted by the end of the week. And I just want to reaffirm Lev's concern. If you could add I'm assuming you would put a page in for each of the 5 entities that you had listed on the stakeholder reach out. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you could add that for Petrostar, that'd be great as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I gotta ask the question, right? So we keep talking about the military as a key stakeholder, and I appreciate that, but they are only a user of the port when they need it, right? When they need to do a deployment or not. So maybe we could clarify why they get equal say, right? Simplistically, if they're not a regular tenant at the port bringing in regular cargo, and maybe I'm missing something, but I think that is a question that people have asked me before, and I can't quite answer it either.
Well, yeah, let me take a run at that too.
One understatement.
Steve,
Yeah.
would the gentleman please identify himself?
That was Levy and Polsky.
With Petrostar.
Okay,
Sorry
thank
about
you.
that.
Since we're a commercial strategic seaport, it's important that when we're looking at, design options for a facility that's going to last for 70 years, that we give them an opportunity to weigh in what we might be doing that would be to their disadvantage potentially with respect to how we design the place. You're right, they're not here every day. The challenge I have always had is, we've got 3 missions here. We've got support of commercial operations. We are a commercial strategic seaport, so we have support of the Department of Defense. And we also have a responsibility as part of disaster response and recovery planning for the entire state.
Yeah.
And we weigh more heavily of the 3, the commercial responsibilities that we have, because that's the one that pays the bills. But you can't ignore the other 2 responsibilities that we have, because there's going to be at some point the probability, if we're not paying attention, of shortchanging what the expectations are of those 2 other entities when we decide what to design here. And as the owner of the facility, I have, or the representative of the owner of the facility, which is the municipality, I'd have a hard time telling them to go pound sand because they are not here all the time. I've got to look at what their requirements would be and factor that into the final decision on what's in the best interest of all the stakeholders of this place.
Which is really the citizens, which is why we need to take the defense into consideration.
And we asked them for a lot of money.
Like it's, I mean,
Give us a lot.
let's be honest, we do ask.
I do see something down here, there's like 3 grand categories for the Department of Defense, so.
Yeah.
Jim?
So to reinforce what both Steve and Chris said, most of our federal funding, when we're going after grant opportunities, it is, part of the reason we are getting that is because of our DoD commercial strategic seaport status and because of our emergency or disaster response and recovery roles. If it weren't for those two sort of unspoken missions, we would not be getting the federal grants that we get.
Yeah, let's welcome write a check.
And I like the DoD because they pay their bills promptly.
About 20% of our
If you bill them correctly. But no, and I appreciate that, Steve. That was a little bit of a follow-up on the emails we exchanged. When I look at the slides that the gentleman from M&F put together, right? Oh, M&M, excuse me. It clearly says that it's not like the J-Bear folks are gonna go to Whittier or Valdez. So they may complain, but this is still the best port for them to move cargo regardless of whatever design we get. But I think it is worth pointing out that there is a self-serving benefit on the grant side to making sure that they are a stakeholder. So thank you for the clarification.
All right. Any further questions from our guests?
Somebody has a hand up, but I can't tell who.
Hey, Chris, I do want to clarify that we do pay our bills to the port on time as well, so you
Yes,
can ask the folks there as well.
And we pay ours.
Yeah, I got it.
Mr. Plummer.
Yes, this is Lou Lanzine from STDC Alaska Detachment. We do agree with what everybody's saying with regards to the military, the DoD not being a regular customer. But I can tell you this, we will have at least 3 or 4 operations at Port of Alaska in support of the military. It may not be as big as what we have done in the past. There's reorganization that's happening. You've seen that USARAG, or you've heard that USARAG is now gone, but it went to an 11th Airborne Division type command. So what I'm trying to say is we will always have operations going on, and we will require support from Port of Alaska. But we may not be a regular customer, but we need Port of Alaska. Over.
Thank you. All right. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here today and providing with this information. And good luck with the assembly.
Thank you.
Idea how that's gonna read when we look at the transcript.
My name is Steve.
Yes, right.
Your voice won't come through.
There you catch that? I'll call you in about half an hour when this meeting's done so that we can just have a quick debrief.
Okay, time for public comments. Is there anyone who would like to make public comments during this period? Once again, is there anyone who would wish to make public comments? Hearing none, the public comment is closed. Port Director's closing comments. Steve?
No, I don't have much of any except to say thanks very much for participating in this little exercise here. I think we got a lot to use as we prepare this for our final exam and oral arguments with the assembly on May the 17th. And plenty of time to polish things up. So thanks for your inputs. All good comments on everybody's part.
How about our commissioner comments? Excuse me, Steph?
Good meeting. Thank you.
Good.
Nothing for me.
Steve?
Are we gonna get copies of this report?
When it's final, yes.
You'll get, and I can send the slides as part of the meeting packet.
Great, good. Peggy.
Chris,
No comment.
Simon Majeski, I think this was an essential dress rehearsal for your meeting and very valuable. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
all right, it's a good meeting, good discussion.
You want to
That's,
ask Ron?
pardon me?
Ron's online. Yes.
Oh, Ron, sorry.
That's okay. Yes, thank you. Great meeting. I appreciate the presentation. Well done. And I look forward to seeing the slides. I'd like to send those off to my group. Thank you.
All right, next meeting date?
Can I suggest late June, just to make sure we have furniture?
Yeah, works for me. I'm thinking, yeah, 19th or 26th. We know for certain this table and surrounding chairs will be there by mid to late June.
It won't be winter, so we won't need space heaters in case it's not
Well,
heated yet.
The HVAC in that building is magnificent. I'm sure.
Oh, goody. And it's probably already up.
Yeah.
So what do you think? We got June 12, 19, or 26?
Yeah, I agree with Jim. I would suggest leaning more towards the latter half of the month.
26.
26th.
26th?
26 works for me.
Yes. Peggy? All right. June 26 it is. And we will meet over yonder.
Yes.
You please.
Okay, that's it for today. Thank you all. It's been an informative meeting and be safe.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Commissioner Robbins.
Second. Commissioner Minkovich.
Any objections? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Thank you, guys.